But I had a question for you guys. I want to hear you guys' perspective on this because as a former athlete, this is like a double standard nobody talks about. Okay, I want you guys to hear me out on this. Maybe you've heard it before, maybe you haven't. Okay, so if you are an athlete, let's say you play in the MLB or the NFL or NBA, right? MLB has a very long season. Okay, and let's say you make $1 million a year playing in the MLB, right? I think league minimum is 700, but let's say you sign a small deal, you make a million. You make $1 million a year and you're gone 9 months out of the year. Nobody ever says anything about this guy as a father or a dad because you're in the MLB, right? But let's say you're a lawyer and you're gone for 9 months out of the year and you make $1 million. Everybody says it's got to be so hard for this guy's wife and this guy's kids when he's gone. I've realized this being in athletics that we never hold athletes to be that type of, or to the certain standard that we have with just people that have, I guess, jobs that we think we could have as well. We always say, oh, well, the wife needs to understand because he's in the MLB or he's in the NFL making 5 million a year. But the wife to the lawyer doesn't have to understand because he works so much. Have you guys ever thought about something like that?
That's actually an interesting thought. And I think I want to say it may be due to the fact that the amount of athletes that actually go professional is slim to none. I mean, the chances of you going pro is pretty much winning the lottery. So, whereas anybody can go to law school, anybody can become, proficient at something if they give it their all, regardless. But yeah, I think, and I think that is a problem with America too, specifically, is we do kind of idolize, professional sports players a little much. But I don't know, man. That's a tough one to kind of crack open, because yes, the rarity of those people or individual skill levels is pretty incredible, but at the same time, like, people need to keep it simple and honest and just say, hey, look, they're a human just like we are. Like, no matter how good you are at something, you still need to have moral character. You still need to be a good human being and treat others with respect and love and kindness. And so, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm gonna think on that one a little more.
It's
So,
definitely an interesting point. Yeah, go ahead, Dustin. Go ahead.
oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I had a single mom, and when I met my wife, I told her all the men in my family, I didn't have a great role model in my family where they had a great marriage that lasted for 50 years, so I just hadn't seen a successful version of that. So I said, look, let's really dig into this and make sure that we're the exception and we find a way to make this work. And I think being away from your family 9 months out of the year, whether you're an athlete or a lawyer, is very, very tough. And it puts you in a situation where you're less likely to have a successful marriage and be a successful father. So I think, we need to look at athletes and say, okay, you've definitely put yourself in a more difficult situation. And maybe the league can say, all right, we want to make sure these guys have marriages that work. Let's give them a little more time, to go home and see their families. We don't think about that. We just say, well, they're in the season. We have to do everything we can to make them the best possible baseball player. But what about their families and their lives? So I'd love to see a couple days, where the league says, look, these guys deserve this. They've got a family. Let's send them home. Let them go see their kids. Let them go see their wives.
So, can I just peel back the onion a little bit more, or clarification maybe? So you were saying that you think athletes get more of a free pass when it comes to being gone that much? Just to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, I think the average person or fan always looks at athletes and says, "Oh yeah, let's give him a free pass," but to the judge, let's not give him a free pass. Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm the greatest person to ask, because I was prior active duty. I went for 9 months, and then even when you're home, you're training all the time. First year of our marriage, I was gone at least half the time, just weeks on end, randomly. So my whole work-life balance perspective is pretty different than I think most people's, who kind of work a typical 9-to-5 type of thing. I don't think I've ever put that much thought into these athletes are away from the family. When I think about it the most is on the holidays, because when I was deployed, it was whatever. But when you miss the big events, like you were saying, right, your son's birthday, when you missed your brother's birthday, or it was Christmas or something like that, that's when you really start to notice it. So I always think of the Thanksgiving Day football games, and they have bowl games right after Christmas and New Year's, the Rose Bowls on New Year's Day. I'm yeah, that's kind of cool, I guess, if you're a college kid playing the Rose Bowl. I'm you're also kind of missing Christmas time with your family, because you've been training for like 2 weeks up to that game, at least, right? Like very intense. Hey, we're about to play in the big one, and that's not even the pros. So that's when I've like thought about that. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you live that life. What is it really like? I mean, is there a chance to kind of come back and forth, or is it like it's just 9 months solid? I guess I just don't really know because I've never lived that life. So
Yeah, I'll let Brandon share, and then I'll kind of tell you what most guys are doing or what it looks like.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. So I think it's a bias. And it's because a lot of people in their lives sadly don't have things that they're hopeful for, things that bring them joy and hope. And so sports, or things like sports, like actors are in the same boat. They give people that hope, that feeling of, I can do this too because somebody else has achieved it. Like there's a lot of bias there, and so I think that they give those people that extra pass, that slide, because they want to keep that feeling, that hopefulness. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people have like a worldview where sports and movies and all these things are what give them hope and perseverance in their tough lives. But I mean, I think that, to me personally, is what separates a good person anchored in Christ and somebody anchored in the world. But I think it's bias, just pure bias. And it's the same with pretty much any double standard.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. It's definitely a double standard that most people aren't seeing unless you've been in both. Because I would always hear people say, "Well, man, Chris, it's got to be so hard for your wife for you to be gone 150 days a year." And nobody ever said that when I was playing baseball, and I realized that it was always like, "Oh, that's pretty cool, man. Did your wife ever come to any games?" Those were the questions, instead of being like, "Oh, it's got to be so tough for her." And so that's just something that I picked up along the way, transitioning from athlete to now business. But also, what I've noticed is you've got to have a conversation. You've got to have a conversation with your spouse beforehand. Dustin, you said, "Hey," I sat down with my wife and said, "Listen, this is what it's been like in my life. I don't want this cycle to keep going. I want to make sure we're on the same page before we get this bad boy started." Same thing in sports. You gotta say, "Hey, I'm going to be gone a decent bit. I want to make sure we're on the same page with that before we go full throttle with this thing." And then, if you're married, I know a lot of guys, if they're married, they have their spouse or significant other that can travel from game to game sometimes. But if you're married with no kids, that is right. But if you got kids, man, it is tough for them to travel all the time, and you're moving around left and right. So it's really a decent amount of time not seeing your family for sure.